Daniel Jameson sat back in his leather chair, the soft hum of the city outside barely registering as he sifted through the endless flow of digital paperwork on his desk. Earth's skyline gleamed with the twinkling lights of spaceships in transit, but inside his office, it was business as usual. The towering skyscrapers surrounding him were filled with the life of an intergalactic marketplace where human entrepreneurs, like himself, thrived in the complex web of alien trade and commerce. It was a good business, profitable, cutting edge, with clients from the most exotic corners of the galaxy. The human race had carved out its place among the stars, and Daniel had made it his mission to ensure Earth remained a key player in interstellar economics. But lately, something had been gnawing at him. His business, growing ever larger, was becoming more complicated, and Daniel was beginning to feel the pressure. The intergalactic market was not only fast-paced, but also ruthless. That's why he decided it was time to hire someone who could bring a fresh perspective to his company. The idea of hiring an alien had crossed his mind. After all, the universe was teeming with untapped potential and unique skill sets. But what did it mean to employ someone who wasn't human? A secretary, even. Think outside the box, he muttered to himself. You've managed to outsmart corporations, outwit political figures, even survived a near assassination attempt by the Dominion. This should be easy. He called up the ad he'd posted days ago on the Galactic Employment Network. Seeking exceptional individual for administrative position. Must be adaptable, open to interspecies interaction, and capable of handling high-level trade negotiations with diverse alien cultures. It was a straightforward ad, nothing flashy, no hidden agenda. The position was simple: a secretary who could help him manage the increasing number of clients from various alien species. What he didn't expect was what the next few hours would bring. Daniel had just started thinking about the logistics of hiring someone when the message pinged on his holographic terminal. The subject read, Zara Zareth, candidate for secretary. He frowned. The Zareth were a rare species, known for their incredible intelligence and advanced technological abilities. It was said they were the keepers of ancient knowledge, arcane secrets that could bend the very fabric of reality. Daniel had read about them in his company's private research reports, but he'd never met one in person. Their reputation for being aloof and enigmatic preceded them. A Zareth secretary? It seemed improbable. Still, curiosity got the better of him. He clicked on the message. The screen flared to life as the hologram projected an image of a tall figure. The first thing Daniel noticed was the smooth, silken texture of her skin, a shimmering shade of pale green with subtle, iridescent scales running across her neck and shoulders. Her eyes were wide and unblinking, glowing like two opals set into her angular face. Tendrils of light, like streams of plasma, drifted from the top of her head, framing her features. She wore a simple, form-fitting robe of silken material, yet the aura she exuded felt nothing short of regal. Greetings, Mr. Jameson. Her voice came through, smooth and melodic, though there was an edge to it that hinted at a deep well of power. I am Zara of the Zareth. I am writing in response to your recent job posting. I believe I possess the qualities you seek. Daniel blinked, taken aback. He had been expecting an alien of some sort, but not someone of this caliber. She was a being of obvious intellect, and her presence felt like a force of nature. Zara, you do realize this position is for a secretary, right? Daniel asked, trying to keep his voice neutral, though the curiosity in his tone was undeniable. Yes, Mr. Jameson, she replied, her voice smooth but firm. I am fully aware. I have been trained for several decades in various high-ranking positions, including administrative, diplomatic, and technical roles in galactic corporations. My skills extend beyond the bounds of your usual human secretary. Impressive, Daniel muttered, but I assume you understand the complexities of Earth business. I have studied Earth's corporate structure, Zara replied, her eyes narrowing with an almost imperceptible gleam of confidence. In fact, I have observed your company's impressive growth over the past few years. My assistance could further facilitate your operations. Daniel felt a flutter of discomfort. The Zareth weren't known for their humbleness, but Zareth's confidence was not arrogance. It was something else entirely. It was certainty, and it made him uneasy. Still, the offer was too intriguing to dismiss outright. You know, I wasn't expecting an alien for this role. I mean, I'm all for diversity, Daniel said, half joking, half serious. But you seem more suited for a higher role than secretary. Zara's expression shifted subtly, but her voice remained steady. I understand your hesitation, Mr. Jameson. However, you may find that my capabilities are far more versatile than you anticipate. If you are seeking a more traditional secretary, you may look elsewhere. But I assure you, I can be more than that. Her final words hung in the air, pregnant with meaning. Daniel wasn't sure if she was offering herself as something more than a secretary, or if she was subtly implying a hidden agenda. The idea of a secretary capable of manipulating gravity, of being an expert in diplomacy and business dealings, was a temptation few humans could resist. Before he could ask further questions, the room trembled. The deep rumble of an explosion echoed from below, sending a ripple through the walls. What the hell? Daniel muttered, his gaze snapping to the window. A small tremor followed, and the lights flickered. His heartbeat quickened. Zara's gaze, which had been calm up until now, sharpened. Her opalescent eyes glinted with an unsettling intensity. Mr. Jameson, she said, voice unchanging, I suggest you prepare yourself. Before he could react, a deafening blast rang out. The entire building shook violently. A string of alarms erupted across the walls, and the door to his office burst open. Armed mercenaries poured in, weapons drawn, their expressions cold and determined. But their intent wasn't just to rob the place. They were here for him. Zara's tendrils of light flared, and with a swift motion, the gravity around the mercenaries warped. In an instant, their weapons were crushed, twisted into useless lumps of metal. The men froze, staring at their malfunctioning rifles in disbelief. Go, Zara commanded, her voice carrying an edge of authority that brooked no argument. Daniel's instincts kicked in. We need to get to the emergency bunker, he said, standing and backing toward the hidden elevator in the corner of the room. Zara nodded, her body twisting through the air as the gravity around them shifted, lifting them off the ground with ease. The room seemed to stretch and bend, and suddenly, they were soaring through the air, making their way down the corridor with unearthly speed. Let's just hope I didn't hire the wrong person, Daniel muttered under his breath, trying to shake off the unease building in his chest. But there was no time to second-guess his decision now. With a sudden, forceful twist of the air, they flew toward the heart of the danger. And in that moment, Daniel knew. Hiring an alien secretary had been the most unexpected thing to happen to him. But what came next was bound to be even more unimaginable. The chaos that erupted after the explosion had barely begun to subside when Daniel and Zara reached the emergency bunker. They moved swiftly, Zara's manipulation of gravity making their journey feel like a breeze as she levitated them down the corridor, twisting through tight spaces with precision that defied the very laws of physics. Daniel clung to his focus, trying not to be overwhelmed by the strange, surreal quality of everything happening so quickly. The bunker, a facility hidden deep beneath the building, was meant to withstand attacks from every conceivable angle. Steel-reinforced doors slid shut behind them with a heavy thud, sealing them off from the chaos outside. Daniel took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing pulse. The sound of his footsteps echoed hollowly in the metallic corridors as he followed Zara to the central control room. She had already begun interfacing with the security system, her tendrils of light dancing across the console with eerie elegance. What was that explosion? Daniel asked, rubbing his forehead as he leaned against the wall. An attack, Zara replied, her voice tight but controlled. Her glowing eyes flickered momentarily, as though processing something. But not just any attack. It was a warning. They wanted to draw you out, force you into a corner. Who are they? Daniel pressed, urgency creeping into his tone. The Zeroth Alliance, Zara said, without hesitation. a ruthless faction of pirates and mercenaries that operate in the far reaches of the galaxy. They're led by a figure known only as the Raven. They deal in weapons, secrets, and power, anything that can be sold to the highest bidder. Daniel's mind raced. He knew the Zeroth Alliance by reputation, but this was the first time he'd had direct dealings with them. He had been careful to avoid stepping into their territory, operating well within the bounds of what he knew was safe. Or so he had thought. But why me? I've never crossed paths with them before. I don't deal in their kind of business, he said, his voice tinged with frustration. Zara turned to face him, her eyes sharp and calculating. You're wrong. You may not have dealt directly with them, but they've been watching you for some time. The growth of your company has made you a target, but the real threat is not the Zeroth Alliance. The Raven is merely a pawn in this game. What do you mean? Daniel's pulse quickened. If there's something bigger at play, I need to know now. I've been following a pattern, Zara continued, her expression darkening. The Zeroth Alliance's attack is a distraction. Their real purpose is to test your defenses, to see how you react. The true power behind this attack comes from a faction far more dangerous, the Dominion. Daniel froze, his eyes locking onto Zarias. The Dominion, the very name struck fear into the hearts of countless galactic leaders, and for good reason. They were an ancient and militarily dominant empire, known for their brutal conquest of whole star systems. The mere suggestion that the Dominion was involved in his business was terrifying. You're saying the Dominion is targeting me? Daniel's voice was barely a whisper, disbelief washing over him. Zara nodded slowly. I'm afraid so. And this isn't just about you, Mr. Jameson. It's about your knowledge, your connections. The Dominion believes you have information that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. Information? Daniel scoffed, incredulous. I don't know anything. I'm just a businessman. Zara's gaze softened for a moment, but her tone remained firm. You're more than just a businessman. You've uncovered something, or rather, you're sitting on something that they want, something that could alter the course of galactic history. The Dominion is relentless. If they think you know something, they will stop at nothing to extract it from you. The weight of her words settled heavily on his chest. This was no longer about trade routes or financial gain. This was about survival. Daniel realized with a sinking feeling that he had stumbled into a war he never intended to fight, and the only way out was through it. I need to know everything, Daniel said, his voice steady now, hardened by the gravity of the situation. If the Dominion's involved, we can't waste time. Zara turned to face the control panel again, her tendrils pulsing with energy as she interfaced with the systems. I'll give you what I can, she said, her eyes scanning the data streaming across the screen. But we need to move quickly. The Dominion spies are already in place, and if they suspect that I've been compromised, they won't hesitate to destroy everything in their path. The room grew tense, and Daniel's mind raced. How had he, a simple human entrepreneur, become the focal point of such a deadly conflict? What was this information the Dominion believed he possessed? And most importantly, how was he supposed to fight back against an empire that had crushed civilizations for centuries? The answer came far too soon. A flash of red light filled the room. The bunker's alarms blared to life, and a screen on the far wall lit up, displaying a high-level security feed from the building's outer perimeter. The unmistakable sight of an enormous warship descending from the sky sent a cold shiver through Daniel's spine. It was the Reaver. The warship silhouette filled the screen, its massive hull casting a shadow over the city as it slowly lowered toward the ground. The Reaver was a vessel of legend, a ship so feared that few had ever seen it and lived to tell the tale. It was a Dominion warship, a symbol of their overwhelming might. How are they already here? Daniel gasped. That ship, it wasn't supposed to be active. I told you, Zara said, her voice calm but edged with urgency. The Dominion doesn't take chances. The Reaver is their most advanced ship, and it's not just here to intimidate you. It's here to destroy everything. Before Daniel could ask another question, the ground beneath them trembled. The Reaver had landed, and it was bringing the full force of the Dominion with it. Through the bunker's thick walls, Daniel could hear the distant rumble of weapons being charged and the unmistakable hum of energy shields coming online. "We don't have much time," Zara said, her voice cutting through the tension. "We need to act quickly. The Dominion won't waste any more time." Daniel's eyes darted to the weapons locker in the corner of the room. He had never been one to fight, never had the need, but the threat was real, and the time for hesitation was over. "Let's get to work," he said, his voice steady despite the growing sense of dread. As Zara began to prepare, Daniel couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. The battle for his survival and the future of his galaxy was about to begin, and the most unexpected thing had just happened. He was at the center of it all. The air in the bunker seemed to tighten around Daniel as the walls shook from the impending arrival of the Reaver. The Dominion's warship wasn't just some fleet ship. It was a fortress, a symbol of their might. Daniel had read about it in history books, but the sight of it now, on Earth's doorstep, made his blood run cold. He'd always known that his rise to prominence in the intergalactic market wouldn't come without enemies, but he never imagined the Dominion would take such an interest in him. Zara stood at the control console, her tendrils of light dancing in the air as she interfaced with the system. The soft glow from her hair illuminated her sharp features, and her eyes, usually so calm, now bore an intensity that matched the gravity of the situation. Her fingers moved with lightning speed across the console, bypassing security protocols, pulling up satellite feeds, and assessing the incoming threat. "Where are they coming from?" Daniel asked, his voice tight with urgency. "Through the main entrance," Zara said without looking up. "A standard assault team is likely already on the ground, but I've detected other, more advanced signatures just beyond them. The Dominion won't waste their elite forces on a mere strike against an entrepreneur." Daniel's stomach dropped as he realized what that meant. "They're coming for me directly," he muttered. "Not just my business." Zara nodded gravely. "Correct. The Dominion doesn't deal in half measures. If they want you, they will make sure they get you alive or dead." The bunker door shuddered as the first blast from the Reaver's weapon struck the ground just outside. The lights flickered, and Daniel felt the entire structure tremble. He could hear the distant sounds of heavy footsteps and weapons being charged. A low, mechanical hum reverberated through the walls, signaling the Dominion's attack was imminent. "Get ready," Zara said, her voice now a cold command. Daniel's hand tightened around the plasma rifle he'd pulled from the weapons locker. His heart was pounding in his chest, but he pushed down the rising panic. The situation was dire, and there was no room for hesitation. He had trained for situations like this, but the weight of the fight ahead still settled heavily on him. Zara turned to face him, her eyes focused and intense. "There's no time to plan. We'll need to move fast. The best defense is not to wait for them to come to us. We'll take the fight to them." With a swift gesture, she manipulated the gravity around them, lifting them off the ground and sending them speeding down the corridor. They passed through the narrow hallways with ease, the gravity shifting to their will as they surged toward the bunker's exit. Daniel barely had time to adjust before they were out of the underground facility, soaring into the open air. The cold wind of the evening hit his face as he caught sight of the warship above, its massive form looming like a dark cloud over the city. The ground shook with each step of the Dominion's assault team as they approached, armored soldiers emerging from the shadows with energy weapons raised. Without warning, Zara raised a hand and the gravity around them shifted again. The soldiers in front of them staggered, caught off guard as their weapons were pulled from their hands and sent spinning into the air. The soldiers themselves were sent tumbling backward, weightless, until they slammed into the ground in a pile. Daniel didn't hesitate. He fired, his shot cutting through the air and striking the closest soldier in the chest. The soldier's body crumpled to the ground, the armor charred by the plasma blast. But as he aimed for another target, the ground shook violently, and more soldiers appeared from the surrounding buildings, their weapons blazing. They're flanking us, Daniel shouted, ducking behind a nearby structure. The situation was rapidly spiraling out of control. More forces were arriving, and there was no way they could hold out against the full might of the Dominion. But Zara didn't seem concerned. She stepped forward, raising both hands, and with a sweeping motion, she bent the gravity around her, sending shockwaves outward. The entire street buckled beneath the force. Buildings shook, windows shattered, and the ground split open as the Dominion soldiers were lifted off their feet and thrown back into the air. Several of them slammed into the sides of nearby structures with bone-crushing force, the remnants of their armor scattering like debris. "Now's our chance," Zara said, her voice calm and unflinching as the chaos swirled around them. Daniel didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted forward, plasma rifle in hand, as the remaining soldiers scrambled to regain their footing. He opened fire again, his shots finding their marks as the soldiers fell one by one. But it was clear this wasn't a battle they could win by sheer firepower. The Dominion's elite soldiers were well-trained, their advanced technology and weaponry outclassing anything Daniel's company had access to. And then, as if on cue, the ground began to tremble again, this time with a far more menacing presence. From above, the Reaver's massive engines flared to life. The ship began its descent, casting an enormous shadow over the battlefield as it hovered just above the ground. Daniel's stomach dropped. The Reaver's size alone was enough to bring an army to its knees, but it was the ship's arsenal that terrified him. The warship's weapons began charging, the sky lighting up with energy beams as they rained down on the battlefield. Buildings crumbled under the weight of the blast, and the air itself seemed to warp with the destructive power of the weaponry. "We need to get out of here," Daniel shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the Reaver's assault. Zara was already several steps ahead. With a motion of her hands, she twisted the gravity around them again, sending them soaring into the air, away from the line of fire. They shot upwards, high above the buildings, as explosions rocked the ground below. From this vantage point, Daniel could see the full scale of the Dominion's attack. Soldiers were now pouring out of the Reaver, their numbers overwhelming. It was clear they intended to wipe him out and everyone around him. The battle was just beginning, and for the first time, Daniel understood the true scope of the threat he was facing. "We're not done yet," Zara said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "But we can't fight them head-on. Not yet." "Then what do we do?" Daniel asked, his mind racing as he tried to process everything happening so fast. "We find their weaknesses," she replied, her voice low and determined. "We hit them where they don't expect it." With that, Zara manipulated the gravity around them once more, hurling them through the air at high speed toward a nearby building. As they approached, she twisted the gravity again, slamming them into the structure with enough force to create a shock wave. The building buckled under the impact, and dust and debris filled the air. From here, they would have to plan their next move carefully. But the first battle had already begun, and it was clear that Daniel's life would never be the same. The Dominion had come for him, and they wouldn't stop until they had destroyed everything he held dear. But Daniel wasn't going down without a fight. The air felt thick with the electric tension of battle, the hum of distant weaponry vibrating through the ruined streets below. The sounds of the Dominion forces pouring into the city reverberated in Daniel's chest, each step of their assault like the drumbeats of an impending war. As Zara and Daniel huddled behind the debris of the shattered building, the reality of their situation settled over him. The warship, the mercenaries, and the terrifying truth that the Dominion's attention had now fully shifted to him. "This is escalating faster than I expected," Daniel muttered, his voice tight with frustration as he peered over the edge of their makeshift cover. He could see soldiers swarming the streets, their faces hidden behind high-tech visors, their plasma weapons glowing ominously. Zara's glowing eyes narrowed, focusing intently on the movements of the Dominion forces below. She moved with a fluid, almost otherworldly grace, analyzing every angle, calculating their next move. "You're right. The Dominion doesn't act without reason. They must have known you would resist. Or they're just here for whatever they think I know, Daniel said grimly. But they haven't even said what they want from me yet. How do they know? He stopped mid-sentence as a new figure appeared in the distance, emerging from the chaos, walking calmly through the destruction. At first, Daniel thought it was another soldier, but as the figure came into view, his stomach twisted in recognition. Is that? Daniel began, but his words trailed off as the figure came into clearer focus. Zaria's eyes flickered with an expression Daniel couldn't quite place, though it was clear she knew this person. It's him, she said softly. I had hoped we wouldn't cross paths so soon. The figure, tall and imposing, was garbed in sleek, dark armor, a black cloak flowing behind him as he moved. His helmet was reflective, but the silhouette of his sharp, angular features beneath it was unmistakable. His presence, commanding and terrifying, exuded an air of someone who was no stranger to battles of the highest order. That's him, Zara muttered again, her voice low with a sense of dread. The Raven? The Raven? Daniel echoed, his pulse quickening. Who is he? Zara's eyes softened with a cold sorrow. The Raven is the leader of the Dominion's Black Ops Division. He's a man of secrets, manipulation, and assassination. A ghost in the shadows, but he's also the one behind the pull of strings within the Dominion. Daniel's mind raced. The Dominion's Black Ops Division was something of a myth, an elite, clandestine faction that operated in the shadows, carrying out covert missions of unimaginable danger. To have him here on Earth meant that whatever was happening was far more than a mere corporate war. It was personal. And he's here for me, too? Daniel asked, swallowing hard. Zara's face was grim. He is. And he will not stop until you are in his hands. The Raven is dangerous. He's not just here to take you down physically. He's here to break you mentally. If you don't trust me when I say this, trust me now. This man is not one you want to face head-on. The sound of marching soldiers drew their attention back to the scene below. The Raven was now flanked by a squad of Dominion soldiers, all of them silently moving in formation, as though they had rehearsed every step in advance. Their movement was deliberate, their purpose clear. They weren't just here to fight. They were here to capture. And it wasn't just Daniel who was a target. They were sweeping the area, systematically taking out anyone who stood in their way. This is bad, Daniel muttered, heart hammering. How the hell do we stop someone like that? You don't, Zara said flatly. At least, not directly. The Raven works in the shadows, and that's where he'll stay. But, she hesitated, her expression shifting. There's one way we might have a chance. Daniel turned toward her. What do you mean? We need to lure him into the open. He thinks he's in control here, but he's not. Zara's eyes gleamed with a calculating intensity. I can use his own arrogance against him. I need to get close enough to him to trigger a response. But for that to happen, you need to be bait. Daniel's eyes widened. You want me to? No, Zara interrupted, her voice firm. You don't have a choice in the matter. The Raven's arrogance is his biggest weakness. He believes no one can touch him. If I'm right, I can manipulate the gravitational fields around him, give us the upper hand, but we need him to underestimate you first. He can't see you as a threat. Daniel scowled, weighing the words carefully. Everything inside him screamed to resist, to find another way. But he knew they didn't have time. The Reaver was still hovering above them, and its weaponry continued to strike with brutal precision, reducing entire buildings to rubble. They were on borrowed time. He nodded, his resolve hardening. All right, what do I need to do? Zara's lips curled into something that resembled a smile, though it was more a promise of calculated danger than anything remotely comforting. You play the part of the helpless businessman. Draw him in. Let him think he has you cornered. Then I'll strike. Daniel's throat went dry. The idea of being bait made his skin crawl, but it was their best shot. He had no choice. With a single, deliberate motion, Zara turned her head back to the battlefield. Let's move. We don't have long. As they moved through the ruins, staying low to avoid detection, Daniel's mind raced. How was he supposed to act like an easy target? The Raven and his men would be able to read him like an open book. They could sense weakness, and Daniel wasn't weak. But that's exactly what Zara wanted, to make him seem vulnerable. They reached the heart of the battlefield, where the Raven and his soldiers had begun their sweep. Daniel was already in place, standing among the wreckage of a destroyed building, trying to appear disoriented, uncertain. His heart pounded in his chest as the Raven squad began to close in on him. Zara was close behind, but she kept herself hidden in the shadows, watching with an intensity that sent a shiver down Daniel's spine. The Raven was getting closer. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Raven stepped into the open. He was close, so close that Daniel could almost feel the weight of the man's icy gaze. His armor glinted in the light, a dark reflection of the very threat Daniel had spent years trying to avoid. "You're the one they call Jameson," the Raven said, his voice calm, cold. "The human who thinks he can outsmart the Dominion. You're far too naive." Daniel swallowed, trying to steady his breath. He had to play his part. I don't know what you want from me," he stammered, forcing fear into his voice. "I'm just a businessman. I don't have anything you—" The Raven raised his hand, cutting him off. "Don't lie to me. You know exactly what I want. And when I'm done with you, you'll wish you'd never stepped foot in this galaxy." Daniel held his ground, trying not to betray the growing terror in his chest. He knew what came next. Zara was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Just as the Raven took another step forward, a sudden shift in gravity ripped through the air, and the Raven was pulled off the ground, his feet suddenly weightless. Zara's tendrils of light surged out of the shadows, twisting the very fabric of gravity around him. "You really thought I wouldn't see through your plan?" the Raven sneered as he struggled to regain control. Zara's eyes gleamed with cold fury as she spoke from the shadows, her voice a low whisper that carried across the battlefield. "I told you, Raven, you underestimated us." With a flick of her wrist, the gravity around the Raven intensified, pinning him to the ground with a crushing force. Daniel stared, his heart racing. This was only the beginning. The battle had taken an unexpected turn, and the true war was only just beginning. The Raven may have thought he controlled the situation, but now he realized he was not the one pulling the strings. And that was only the first lesson Daniel Jameson would teach him.